The Keth battle fleet had 17 warships circling what their sensors insisted was a dead vessel. Fleet Prime Voss watched the readout on his command screen and felt the first small thread of unease he had not expected to feel today. The human ship was not moving. It had not moved in 4 minutes. 3 of its engine ports were dark. Its hull had taken 46 direct strikes from Keth pulse cannons, which was, by every calculation Voss's War College education had prepared him for, approximately 30 more than any vessel of that size could absorb and remain structurally intact. It was still intact. Hull integrity, he asked his sensor operator. The sensor operator, a young officer named Gret, looked at his screen twice before answering. Reading at 62% Fleet Prime. Voss turned slowly, 62. Yes, sir. That was not possible. The ship was old by human standards. Its registry data showed it had been commissioned 19 years ago, which in Keth naval terms meant it should have been decommissioned and stripped for parts a decade back. Its listed class was a heavy cruiser, a designation that in human fleet records corresponded to a vessel designed for sustained combat operations, not for absorbing the concentrated fire of 17 warships at close range. And yet there it sat. The name on its hull, visible on the visual feed, was painted in the human alphabet his translation matrix rendered as the Iron Patience. He did not like that name. He had not liked it when the intelligence report first mentioned it, and he liked it considerably less now. Hail them, he said. The channel opened. Silence from the human side for 3 seconds. Then a voice, male, unhurried, the tone of a man who had checked something off a list and was moving to the next item. Fleet Prime Voss, I was wondering when you would call. The voice belonged to Captain Owen Marsh. His file photo showed a man in his mid-40s with a face that had clearly decided years ago that expressions were optional. His service record was 31 pages long and contained 11 separate engagements where his commanding officers had filed what the human military bureaucracy apparently called a discrepancy report, meaning Marsh had done something that produced a positive outcome through methods nobody could officially endorse or explain. Voss looked at those 11 discrepancy reports differently now than he had this morning. Captain Marsh, he said, keeping his voice flat, your ship is disabled. Your escorts were destroyed 40 minutes ago. You are surrounded by 17 Keth warships, and you are approximately 9 hours from the nearest human military installation. I am offering you the opportunity to surrender with honor. The pause on the other end was the length of a man taking a slow breath. That is generous, Marsh said. Here is my counteroffer. You pull your fleet back 20,000 kilometers, you send me the coordinates of your command base in the Kreth corridor, and I do not do what I am about to do. Voss felt the unease expand. What, he said carefully, are you about to do? Well, Marsh said, that depends on whether you take the counteroffer. Gret made a sound at his station. Not a word. A sound, the kind a person makes when their instrument shows them something and their brain is 2 seconds behind catching up to what it means. Fleet Prime, Gret's voice had changed register entirely. The human ship's engine signature is changing. The dark ports are coming back online, all of them. Voss looked at the visual feed. The Iron Patience was moving. Not fast, not urgently. With the slow, deliberate momentum of something that had been waiting for the right moment and had decided, without particular drama, that the moment had arrived. Its hull, pocked and scored from 46 pulse strikes, caught the light of the local star as it turned, and Voss saw something that made no sense to him. The impact craters were smaller than they had been 4 minutes ago. Not dramatically smaller, not visibly healing in real time. Just measurably, undeniably, according to his sensor readout, smaller. As if the hull material were doing something to itself that hull material was not supposed to be capable of doing. What is its hull made of? He asked, because suddenly he needed to know the answer to that question more than he had needed to know anything in a long time. Gret ran the spectral analysis, ran it again. I do not know, Gret said. Fleet Prime, I genuinely do not know. The material signature does not match anything in our database. It is not in the Concord registry. It is not in any captured human technical documents. It is not reading as metal or composite or ceramic or any alloy we have a classification for. Marsh's voice came back over the open channel, unhurried as before. Fleet Prime, I am going to need your answer in the next 60 seconds. After that, the conversation gets more complicated. Voss stared at his screen. 17 warships. One human cruiser that had absorbed enough firepower to level a city block and was now, according to every sensor his flagship carried, in better structural condition than it had been 10 minutes ago. He thought about the name on the hull. The Iron Patience. He thought about 11 discrepancy reports. He thought about the specific, particular confidence in Owen Marsh's voice, not the confidence of a man bluffing, not the confidence of a man performing bravery because the situation required it, but the confidence of a man who had already run the numbers and found them satisfactory. All ships, Voss said quietly, hold fire, maintain positions. He needed more information before he made another move. He had a feeling, deep and cold, that he was already several moves behind. Scholar Dren had been awake for 31 hours when Fleet Prime Voss summoned him to the command deck, and the data he carried was giving him a headache that had nothing to do with sleep deprivation. He spread the probe's findings across the holographic display table. Voss stood on one side. 3 senior tactical officers stood on the other. None of them spoke for a long moment after the readout populated. The human ship's hull was registering as a composite material that the Keth Science database had no entry for. That part was strange but not unprecedented. Human materials engineering had surprised Keth analysts before. What was unprecedented was the energy absorption reading. Pulse cannon fire, when it struck a standard hull, transferred approximately 80% of its energy as structural damage and heat dissipation, with the remaining 20% reflecting outward. The Iron Patience was registering a damage transfer rate of roughly 12%. That means, said Tactical Officer Pren, who had a mathematician's love of implications, that every shot we fired, the other 88% of the energy went somewhere. Into the ship, Dren said. Into the ship, Pren agreed, and the structural integrity went up. Voss looked at him. The hull absorbs the impact energy, Dren said carefully, the way a person says a thing they know sounds wrong but have checked 3 times and cannot find the error in. It converts it. The material does not resist damage. It processes it. Each strike makes the molecular structure denser. The command deck was quiet except for the background hum of 17 warship systems running in standby. We made it stronger, Pren said. By 46 shots worth, Dren said. Aboard the Iron Patience, Lieutenant Nora Blake was watching the same silence from the other side and finding it considerably more nerve-wracking than she would have liked. She stood at the weapons console and kept her eyes on the Keth fleet's engine signatures, watching for the specific fluctuation pattern that preceded a firing solution. Her hands were relaxed on the console. Her expression was not. They sent a probe, she said. I know, Marsh said from the captain's chair. They will have the hull readings now. Yes. So they know what we are made of. Marsh turned to look at her. He had the specific quality of stillness that some people develop after years of being in rooms where the wrong word at the wrong moment carries serious consequences. What they have, he said, is data they do not have a framework for. Data without a framework is not knowledge. It is confusion. In the engine room 4 decks below, engineer Dan Cole was doing his version of managing stress, which involved checking the reclamite integration nodes in a sequence he had already completed twice. The nodes were fine. They had been fine 46 strikes ago, and they were fine now, and they would continue to be fine up to the threshold load, which Cole knew to within a margin of error of about 3%. The margin of error was not a source of comfort. He kept checking anyway. The reclamite hull had been Dr. Kate Wren's project for 11 years. Cole had worked with her for 4 of those years before the Iron Patience's construction, and he retained, with absolute fidelity, the memory of the afternoon she had walked into the engineering bay with a sample of the first successful composite batch, and placed it on the workbench, and hit it with a pressure hammer and said, with the quiet delight of someone who has been right about something for a very long time, "There." The dent from the hammer blow had filled in over the course of 40 seconds. The material had not returned to its original configuration. It had become denser than it started. There, Cole had agreed. Back on the Keth flagship, Voss had made a decision. He was not going to attack again until he understood what he was attacking. He had put in a request for reinforcements, 8 additional warships from the Kreth Corridor garrison, and was waiting on the response. In the meantime, he had Scholar Dren working through every piece of captured human technical intelligence looking for any reference to a self-reinforcing composite hull material. There was none. There were, however, 14 references in various intercepted human military communications to something called a Ren-class material designation, always mentioned in the context of a specific shipyard on the far side of human space, always mentioned in communications flagged at the highest security classification the humans used, which the Keth Intelligence Service had managed to intercept but never managed to decrypt. Dren stared at those 14 references for a long time. He thought about the name on the hull, the Iron Patience. He thought about a ship that got stronger when you hit it. He opened a new analysis file and titled it Design Intent, because Scholar Dren had spent his career studying how intelligent species built things, and the thing he had learned, the most important thing, the one that cut through every other complexity, was that how a species built something told you exactly what that species intended to do with it. The Iron Patience had not been built to survive punishment. It had been built to invite it. That distinction, Dren thought, was the difference between a ship that could endure a battle and a ship that needed one. He sent an urgent message to Fleet Prime Voss. The message said, "Do not fire again under any circumstances." It arrived at Voss's station 11 seconds after Voss received confirmation that the 8 additional warships from the Kreth Corridor garrison were 40 minutes out. Voss read Dren's message. He looked at the reinforcement confirmation. He made the wrong choice. He told the reinforcements to proceed. The 8 additional warships arrived in formation, which was exactly what Nora Blake had been watching for. "New contacts," she said. 8 warships, Kreth-class heavy pattern bearing 274. Fleet Prime's signal just shifted. He is reorganizing their encirclement. Marsh stood from the captain's chair, which was unusual enough that the 3 crew members nearest him all looked up. "Dan," he said over the ship's internal channel. "Ready?" Cole's voice came back from the engine room, which meant the reclamite integration nodes were at full operational load, which meant the energy stored from 46 pulse cannon strikes was sitting in the hull's redistribution network like water behind a dam, waiting for the valve. "Nora," Marsh said, "show them something new." Blake had been waiting 11 months for that specific instruction. She opened the weapons interface to the secondary grid, the one that did not appear on any external scan because it had no weapons ports, no barrel housings, no energy emitter arrays that any Keth sensor operator would recognize as weapons-related, because it was not technically a weapons system. It was a structural resonance network. It was, officially, part of the hull's energy redistribution architecture. It was, in terms of what it did when Lieutenant Nora Blake gave it a targeting solution and a release command, a directed energy weapon powered entirely by stored impact force, capable of projecting a coherent beam from any point on the hull's surface. It had no barrel. It had no port. It fired from the hull itself, from the same material that absorbed the shots that powered it, and on Scholar Dren's sensor screen, it appeared as a hull integrity fluctuation, followed by an energy release that his instruments registered as structurally generated rather than weapon-generated, because his instruments had no category for a hull that was also a gun. 2 Keth warships ceased to be warships. They became debris fields. The iron Patience had not moved. It sat in the same position it had occupied for the past 40 minutes. It had fired without visible weapons discharge, without any of the targeting signatures that Keth tactical systems were programmed to detect and respond to, and the two ships that no longer existed had had no warning. The Keth fleet broke formation. Not in full retreat, Voss held them from that with forwards over the command channel, but the clean encirclement geometry came apart as his captains instinctively scattered from their grid positions. You cannot hold formation against something your formation training never prepared you for, the training said. When the enemy fires, identify the firing point and return fire. There was no firing point. There was a hull. The hull had killed two ships. Energy levels, Marsh asked. Down to 61% stored capacity, Blake said. We used about a third of what they gave us. Then we need them to be generous again. Voss's voice came over the channel. It was different now. The flat professional authority was still there, but something had moved underneath it, the way the surface of water looks different when there is a current running beneath it. Captain Marsh, what is your ship? It was not quite a question. It was the vocalization of a man who had stopped being certain about the shape of the situation he was in. It is a cruiser, Marsh said. Standard classification, you can look it up. Standard cruisers do not fire from hull plating. The hull does not fire. It releases. There is a distinction. Scholar Dren will be able to explain it to you in about 4 hours once he works through the physics. Silence on the channel, then. You knew we would scan the hull. You allowed the probe to approach. I needed you to get the readings. Otherwise, you would have kept shooting, and this conversation would be shorter and less interesting. In the silence that followed, Cole made a sound over the internal channel that was not quite a laugh. On the Keth flagship, Dren was doing exactly what Marsh had predicted, moving through the physics at a pace limited less by his intelligence than by the fact that the physics required him to accept several intermediate conclusions that each took a moment to absorb on their own. The hull material absorbed energy and stored it in the molecular lattice. The structural resonance network could direct that stored energy as a coherent projection from any point on the hull surface. The ship needed to be shot to reload. It did not have a fuel supply in any conventional sense. Its ammunition was the enemy's aggression. Dren sat with that for the length of time it took him to understand why the ship was named the Iron Patience. Then he sent another message to Voss. This one said, "The ship is more dangerous the more we attack it. Every shot we fire is a reload. We cannot fight it with conventional engagement. We need to withdraw and rethink the entire engagement model." Voss read the message while watching his formation commanders, trying to re-establish grid positions around a target that had twice in the past hour made him feel like he was holding a strategic conversation with someone who had already read the transcript. He thought about the Kreth corridor and what was in it. His command base was there. The garrison he had just pulled 8 ships from was there. 3 inhabited systems were there. He thought about the single human warship sitting in the middle of his now fractured fleet. He thought about Captain Owen Marsh's voice and the specific quality of it, not the performed calm of a bluffer, but the settled tone of a man managing a checklist. He thought about one item that might still be on that list. "Scholar Dren," he said, "is there a limit to how much energy the hull can store?" Dren stopped typing. "Every material has structural limits," he said slowly. "But we do not know what that limit is. No, Fleet Prime, we do not." In the Iron Patience's engine room, Cole was looking at the integration node readout. 61% of threshold capacity, 39% of margin remaining. He knew the threshold. Dr. Kate Wren had calculated it to 4 decimal places, and then added a safety margin, and then added another safety margin on top of that because she was, Cole had always thought, the right kind of cautious. The kind that assumes you will find a way to get into trouble she has not accounted for and leaves you room to survive it. He hoped the room was enough. He sent Marsh a quiet single-line status report. Marsh read it. His expression, which had not changed significantly since the battle started, shifted by an amount that only Nora Blake, who had served with him for 3 years, would have been able to read as anything at all. She read it as the particular look of a man who has confirmed what he hoped was true and is now committed. "Nora," he said, "what is the Keth fleet doing?" "Holding," she said. "Voss has them in a loose circle. None of them are in firing position. I think he is waiting." "He is wondering if there is a ceiling," Marsh said. "Is there?" Marsh looked at the main screen, at 17 remaining Keth warships and the debris of the 2 that were no longer in the count, and said nothing for a moment. "There is," he said. "Tell Dan I want everything we have stored in the forward redistribution nodes." Blake did not ask why forward specifically. She had spent enough time reading tactical maps to know that forward, from the Iron Patience's current position, pointed directly toward the Kreth corridor. She sent the instruction to Cole. She watched the node readout on her secondary screen climb as the stored energy routed forward. She watched Voss's fleet. Something was about to happen, and the Keth fleet was not going to like it, and Nora Blake found, in the compressed specific way of people who do dangerous work well, that she was entirely ready. Voss made the decision that Scholar Dren would later, in his written account of the engagement, describe as the only decision available to a commander who did not have sufficient information and was running out of time to acquire it. He ordered a full simultaneous strike. All 15 remaining warships fired together. Converging angles, maximum yield, timed to within half a second of each other, so the Iron Patience's hull would receive every impact simultaneously rather than in the sequence it had been managing before. The logic was sound. If there was a ceiling to what the hull could absorb and store, a saturation strike was the fastest way to find it. The simultaneous impact across multiple hull sections would, in theory, prevent the redistribution network from routing stored energy efficiently. The system would be overwhelmed from multiple directions at once, unable to process the load fast enough, and would either breach or shut down. It was a tactically reasonable plan. It was also the most energy the Iron Patience had ever received in a single engagement window, delivered in one concentrated burst, and Cole watched the integration node readout climb with the specific expression of a man who is watching a measurement approach a line he drew himself and is discovering that the line is farther than he thought. The hull held. Structural integrity dropped to 44% under the simultaneous load, the biggest single drop of the engagement, and the redistribution network strained in ways that Cole could hear as a low-frequency vibration through the deck plating under his feet, a sound the ship had never made before, a sound that meant the material was doing something at the molecular level that exceeded its standard operating parameters. Then the vibration stopped. The integration node stabilized. The readout showed stored capacity at 93% of threshold. Cole exhaled through his teeth. "Owen," he said over the channel, "we are full." On the command deck, Marsh turned to Blake. "Everything we have, full distributed release. I want it spread across their formation, not concentrated." Blake had calculated this firing solution in her head during the 4 minutes Voss's fleet had been reorganizing for the saturation strike. She input it in 11 seconds. The Iron Patience fired. Not from one point on the hull. From every point simultaneously, the entire surface area of the ship releasing stored energy in a coordinated, distributed burst that the Keth fleet's defensive systems registered as a spontaneous full-hull energy event, and had no tactical response to, because their defensive systems were designed to intercept projectiles and beam weapons fired from identifiable points of origin. 4 Keth warships were destroyed outright. 3 more suffered catastrophic systems failures and went dark. The remaining 8, including Voss's flagship, survived with damage ranging from severe to moderate. Voss survived because his ship was positioned at the formation's outer edge and received a fraction of what the inner ships absorbed. He sat in his command chair in a damaged flagship, surrounded by the debris of his fleet, and felt, for the first time in a 30-year military career, completely without a next move. Fleet Prime. Gret's voice was doing the thing it did when the readings made no sense. The human ship's structural integrity is reading at 78%. Not 44, 78. The act of firing had not depleted the hull. The act of firing had, in some way Gret could not explain from his sensor console, and Dren could not immediately explain from his analysis station, improved the hull's condition, as if the release of stored energy had settled the molecular structure into a denser configuration than it had held before the saturation strike. It had been shot at with 15 warships' simultaneous maximum yield. It was in better shape than before the battle started. Voss opened the channel. Marsh answered on the first signal. Fleet Prime, Marsh said. Voss found that he had several things he wanted to say, and that none of them were tactically useful. You could have done that at the beginning, Voss said. The full release, when we had 17 ships instead of 8. Yes, Marsh said. You waited for the saturation strike. I needed the saturation strike to top off the nodes. We were sitting at 61%. A full distributed release at 61% is impressive. At 93% it is what you just saw. Voss absorbed that. You needed us to shoot you, he said. One more time, Marsh said. Yes. In the long pause that followed, Marsh received a communication on the command deck's secondary channel, the one routed through the long-range relay that kept the Iron Patience in contact with Human Fleet Command regardless of jamming arrays. Because the relay operated on a frequency the Keth did not know to jam, having been designed after the last time the Keth had tried to cut human ships off from their command network. Admiral Peter Hale's voice was 2 seconds delayed by distance but clear. Owen, Intel just flagged a Keth assault fleet moving through the outer corridor, heading for Ellery Station. 32 ships, arrival in 4 hours. You are the closest asset. Ellery Station had 40,000 people on it. Marsh looked at the main screen. 8 damaged Keth warships, the debris of 7 more, and the Iron Patience sitting with a 78% hull integrity reading, and its redistribution nodes at approximately 40% of capacity after the full release. How long to intercept the Ellery fleet? He asked Blake. 2 hours at best speed, she said, if we leave now. He looked at Voss's battered flagship on the visual feed. He made a decision that would be discussed in human military strategy briefings for the next 20 years. Peter, he said over the command channel, I need the Keth assault fleet to shoot at me for a while before the engagement proper. Can you arrange a provocation that gets them firing early? Hale's 2-second delay felt longer than it was. Owen, Hale said, you want me to arrange for a 32-ship assault fleet to open fire on you. Preferably sustained fire, 15 minutes minimum. Another pause. You are going to explain the engineering to me after this, Hale said, in detail, with diagrams. Yes, sir, Marsh said. He closed the channel and turned back to the main screen, where Voss's 8 remaining warships sat in damaged formation. Fleet Prime, he said, I am going to leave now. I have somewhere to be. I am going to ask you to do something, and I want you to understand that I am asking, not demanding. Voss said nothing. He was listening. Ellery Station is a civilian installation. 40,000 people, mostly researchers and their families, no military assets. The fleet heading for it has orders we both know the content of. Marsh let that sit for exactly 1 second. Pull your ships back. Do not follow me. And if you have any way to reach the Ellery Fleet Command and tell them what you watched happen in the last 2 hours, I would consider that a courtesy. He closed the channel before Voss could answer. Nora Dan, best speed for Ellery. The Iron Patience moved. On the Keth flagship's command deck, Scholar Dren watched the human ship accelerate away and thought about how he was going to write his report on a weapons system that ran on being attacked. He thought about what that design philosophy said about the people who built it. He looked at Voss. Voss was already reaching for the long-range communication array. He had a message to send to the Ellery Assault Fleet. The Keth Assault Fleet Commander, Strike Leader Harn, received Voss's message 40 minutes before the iron patients appeared on his sensors, and spent those 40 minutes doing what experienced military commanders do when they receive reports that do not fit their operational model. He cross-referenced it against everything he knew, found it inconsistent with known human weapons capabilities, and concluded that Voss had experienced some form of sensor malfunction, followed by a tactical failure he was trying to explain away. He kept his fleet on course for Ellery Station. He was aware that a single human warship was now on an intercept trajectory. He had 32 ships. His tactical officers had, without being asked, already calculated the engagement window and produced a projection showing a human casualty probability of 96% within the first 12 minutes of engagement. He was not concerned. The iron patience came out of its best speed run at the intercept point, with its hull sitting at a 38% integrity reading. The sustained drive run had cost structural reserves, pushing the material to its limits in a different way than weapons fire, heating the molecular lattice through drive output rather than impact absorption. Cole had been watching the readings for 2 hours with the focused attention of a man who has been told there is a ceiling and is responsible for making sure they do not find it the wrong way. They were cutting it close. Dan Marsh said. I know, Cole said. He did not say whether the answer to the unasked question was good or not. He was still calculating. Strike Leader Harn hailed the iron patients with the professional courtesy of someone who fully expects the conversation to be brief. Human vessel, you are 1 ship, we are 32. You are on a heading that will bring you into our engagement range in approximately 9 minutes. I am giving you the opportunity to alter course. Marsh's response came back immediately. Strike Leader Harn, I appreciate the heads up. I would like to make a suggestion. Harn indicated to his communications officer to leave the channel open. It cost nothing to hear a suggestion from a man about to make a catastrophic tactical error. I understand you probably have not spoken with Fleet Prime Voss yet, Marsh said. Or maybe you have and you did not believe him, which is understandable. I would not have believed it either. So I want to offer you a demonstration before the engagement starts, because once the engagement starts, my options become significantly more destructive than I would like them to be given the proximity to a civilian installation. What kind of demonstration? Harn said. Open fire on me, Marsh said. Sustained. Whatever yield you want, whatever duration you want. I will hold position. I will not return fire, I will not maneuver, just take it. 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, you can make an informed decision. Harn looked at his tactical officers. His tactical officers looked at each other. You want us to shoot at you, Harn said. For 15 minutes, Marsh confirmed. Yes. It was, Harn thought, either the most sophisticated bluff he had ever encountered or the most straightforward trap. In either case, 15 minutes of weapons fire from 32 warships at a target that was not maneuvering or returning fire was not a significant expenditure of ordnance. And if it resulted in the destruction of the 1 ship standing between his fleet and Ellery Station, it was an efficient use of 15 minutes. He ordered the fire. Cole watched the integration nodes like a man, watching a tide come in on a shore he has carefully measured. The readout climbed, 38% to 50, 50 to 68. The hull was rebuilding as the Keth weapons fire poured in, the structural integrity reading climbing back through the damage the sustained drive run had caused, the reclamite material doing what Dr. Kate Wren had designed it to do, processing the incoming energy, densifying the molecular lattice, storing the excess in the redistribution network with the patient, methodical efficiency of a system built for exactly this. 68 to 79. 79 to 88. At 12 minutes, structural integrity hit 81%, higher than it had been at the start of the engagement with Voss's fleet. At 13 minutes, the redistribution nodes crossed 85% of threshold. At 14 minutes, Cole ran his final check on the network's routing parameters and found everything within tolerance. At 15 minutes, Marsh said, "Thank you, Strike Leader. I think that is enough." The Kethfire stopped. Harn's sensor operator read him the Iron Patience's current hull integrity figure. Harn read it back to make sure he had heard it correctly. He had. "That is not possible," he said. "That is the ship," Marsh said. On Harn's command deck, his tactical officers were doing what Dren had done, working through the implications, finding each one requiring a moment to absorb before the next could be processed. The ship had been under sustained fire from 32 warships for 15 minutes. It was in better structural condition than when the firing started. Its hull was reading as denser than any material in their database. Its redistribution nodes, and Harn's sensor operators were picking them up now, recognizing the energy signatures for what they were now that they knew what to look for, were reading at 85% of what appeared to be a very large threshold capacity. The Iron Patience was loaded. "What you are looking at," Marsh said, "is a weapons platform that runs on being attacked. Every shot you fire at it is ammunition for the return. 32 ships times 15 minutes of sustained fire." A pause. "We are very full, Strike Leader, and Ellery Station is directly behind us." Harn ran the geometry. If the Iron Patience fired everything it had stored in the direction of his fleet, and if the distributed hull release capability Voss had described in his message was accurate, the casualties would not be modest. "You came to defend the station," Harn said. "Yes. With one ship. That is the one we had." Harn thought about 32 warships and a weapons system that improved under fire, and a captain whose voice carried the specific quality of someone who had already made peace with the next 5 minutes regardless of what they contained. He thought about Voss's message. He thought about what Voss had not said in the message, not the technical details, not the capabilities, but the last 3 words: "Be very careful." Voss had been in combat for 30 years and had never, to Harn's knowledge, ended a field communication with "be very careful." Those 3 words, more than the technical description that preceded them, had lived in the back of Harn's mind for the past 40 minutes. He looked at his formation. He thought about Ellery Station. He pulled his fleet back. Not a retreat on paper. The orders he filed used the word reposition, but it was a reposition that took his 32 ships out of the Iron Patience's engagement range and off the vector toward Ellery Station, and kept them there while Marsh held position for the 4 hours it took a human fast response force to arrive and take over the defense of the station. When the fast response fleet arrived and the Iron Patience was finally relieved, the task force commander, Captain Diane Worth, opened a channel to Marsh. "Owen," she said, "how are you doing?" "Tired," he said. "Dan is tired, Nora is tired." "How is the ship?" Cole answered before Marsh could, from the engine room, over the open channel. 91% integrity, he said. "She is better than when we left port." Worth was quiet for a moment. "They shot at you that much," she said. "Quite a bit," Marsh confirmed. In his written report, Scholar Dren concluded his analysis of the Iron Patience engagement with a single observation that his superiors at the HFY Sciences Institute would read and argue about for the next 3 years. He wrote, "The humans did not build a ship that could survive being attacked. They built a ship that required it. The distinction reveals something about how they think that we have not, until now, taken seriously enough. A species that designs weapons to be strongest under maximum duress is a species that has thought about duress in ways the rest of the galaxy has not. The Iron Patience is not an exceptional human ship. It is a logical one. That is the part that should concern us." 40,000 people at Ellery Station never knew how close it had come. Cole ran his final systems check, found everything nominal, and for the first time in 11 months powered the integration nodes down to standby. the iron patience turned for home. It had never looked better.